people will tout these antioxidants as being anti-aging and that kind of thing. And the best anti-aging trick is keeping your blood sugar normal, because high blood sugar will age you faster than anything.
Hey guys, today our guest is Amy Berger. Amy Berger is a low carb and keto nutrition specialist who helps people to do the keto without the crazy. Amy has a master's degree in human nutrition and writes about a wide range of health and nutrition related topics such as insulin, metabolism, weight loss, diabetes, thyroid function, and more. She is the author of groundbreaking books like The Alzheimer's Antidote, The Stall Slayer, and also is the co-author of End Your Carb Confusion with Dr. Eric Westman, whom we interviewed previously on the show. In addition to writing the blog tutenutrition.com, she also has a keto-oriented YouTube channel called Tute Nutrition Keto Without the Crazy. If you read her blog posts or watch her videos, you will find to know that she presents no hype, no sensationalism, no gelatery. Amy strives to keep keto simple, straightforward, and affordable. If you are confused and overwhelmed by conflicting information on diets, she is the best source to follow. I'm very happy to invite Amy Berger to the show. Thanks, Amy, for coming to the show.
Thank you, and thank you for that really great introduction. Very flattered.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, before we go into the interview, can you share where can people connect with you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my main website is tuitnutrition.com, TUIT nutrition.com. And we've hit a little tech problem. You actually have to put www.tuitnutrition. If you don't put www, it won't come up. And I'm very active on Twitter. That's my main social media. So my handle is Tuit Nutrition. And like you said, that's also my YouTube channel. That's my main places to find me.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, my first question is why we should stop labeling the diets?
Oh, good. Wow, that's a challenge right from the start. I think I actually just did a video on this for my channel. And I think the problem is that when we put a specific name on our diet, then we think it's wrong, or we think we're making a mistake if we eat anything that's outside that very strict limitation. Like, for example, if you're doing a carnivore diet, if you ever have a mushroom or a piece of lettuce, all of a sudden you're not carnivore anymore. Or even if you don't need the carnivore diet for a medical therapy purpose, if you're perfectly healthy and you just prefer to eat that way, maybe every now and then you want to have some vegetables. But if you say, well, I'm carnivore, then you feel guilty or you feel ashamed if you have something that's not an animal food. And same thing with keto. If you say, well, I'm keto and I follow a ketogenic diet, then if you ever have a potato or, something else that's starchy or sweet, or contains a high amount of sugar, then you feel like you have to hide it. You feel like you can't be truthful, or people are going to think you're not really keto. And that's a problem with people's very black and white thinking, I think.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, my next question is why lowering carbohydrates is more important than increasing fat?
Oh, another good question. My gosh. So it depends on what somebody's trying to accomplish. But when you're doing a lower carbohydrate or ketogenic diet for improving your health in some way, or whether it's for weight loss or for affecting some kind of metabolic issue like type 2 diabetes or PCOS or, fatty liver, or any of these things that have to do with chronically high insulin or blood sugar, then what makes the diet effective, what leads to all the benefits and improvements that happen, is the lower blood sugar and insulin. And that comes from the reduction in carbohydrate. It doesn't come from adding lots and lots of fat. If adding more and more fat was the reason that this way of eating worked, you could just keep the carbohydrate in your diet and just add more fat. Eat your bread, eat your pasta, eat your rice, just add more ghee, add more butter, add more olive oil, But that's not how it works. It doesn't work because of the increase in fat. It works because you're removing the carbs. It works because of lower blood sugar and insulin, really.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, what do you recommend to the people who are on a weight stall?
Oh, a stall in weight? So it depends on why they're stalled. I have a whole book about this called The Stall Slayer, and people can find that at stallslayer.com, or it's also on Amazon. It The two main reasons are actually pretty simple. Sometimes people are just having too much carbohydrate. They think they're on a very low carb diet, but they're not quite low enough to where they need to be for their own individual body to really have this work. And sometimes, like you were just saying before, there is such a thing as too much fat. Just because you're on a low carb diet doesn't mean you can have unlimited fat. We want your body to be burning the stored fat and not all the fat coming in from the food. And the beauty of this way of eating is that we can enjoy rich, fatty food, but there is a limit. You can't have unlimited dietary fat if you're having trouble losing fat from your body. And then there's a lot of different medications that can make fat loss harder. Thyroid problems are very, very common, and they can make it very difficult to lose weight. So there's a lot of different reasons, but the two most common really are just the diet, too many carbs or too much fat.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, is it possible to reverse thyroid disorders?
It depends. Yeah, it depends on why. Again, it depends on what the problem is. So I guess one of the most common thyroid issues is actually an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And so that's not even really a thyroid issue at all. It's with the immune system. And ketogenic diets, there's not a lot of research on this, but there's a lot of anecdotal reports from people just doing this themselves, that when they have these autoimmune conditions, not just the Hashimoto's, but a lot of different kinds of autoimmune issues, when they do a ketogenic diet, or sometimes they need to do a strict carnivore diet, it gets a lot better. And they can either, stop taking their medicine or reduce the dose, of course, with a doctor's supervision. So that very often helps. There's other reasons why there's thyroid dysfunction, though. And sometimes keto helps. Sometimes you still need a little bit of medication. And then there's some people have had thyroid cancer or other thyroid issues where the thyroid gland is actually removed or it's irradiated. And those people will always need to take thyroid hormone medicine because the gland itself just isn't producing any. So it depends on the situation. But yeah, it's not true that unless the gland has been removed or irradiated, it's not true that once you start medication, you will definitely always need it. Some people will be able to stop taking it.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, some people think that gout is caused by red meat. What do you say about that?
One of my favorite topics. So gout is, this is what we hear all the time, right? Gout comes from red meat. And it's actually, gout is very, very closely associated with metabolic syndrome. And gout comes, I'll try to kind of sum it up quickly. Gout comes because this substance called uric acid builds up in the joints, and it solidifies into crystals that cause all that pain and swelling and inflammation. And the reason everybody thinks it's red meat or seafood and shellfish is also very high. Uric acid is a breakdown product of certain proteins, and certain types of proteins that are high in the shellfish and red meat and things like that. Except the human body normally excretes excess uric acid with no problem. So in people with gout, why is it not being excreted properly? Why is it accumulating? Why is it building up in these joints? And in chronically elevated insulin causes the body to retain more uric acid. When your insulin is high, your body doesn't let go of the uric acid as easily. So it's not so much the red meat, as it's not so much that the uric acid is coming in, or that it comes from the purines and the protein. It's not that that's coming in, it's that it can't get out. And so, yeah, you could reduce meat consumption and seafood consumption, or you could unclog the drain. You could lower the insulin and let your body excrete it. And I mean, it also comes, alcohol can cause gout flares and things. So it's not just meat, but this was, this was considered, gout was considered kind of like a wealthy person's disease hundreds of years ago. Gout's not a new disease. This is centuries old. And so everyone would think it was because the wealthy people were the only people that could afford fatty roasts and good meat, except back then, wealthy people were also the only ones who could afford sugar. Sugar was a luxury item 300 years ago, right? So, and they've actually done some studies where people go on a low carb diet and they end up eating more protein and they have fewer gout attacks. So it's really not the meat. Now, I do want to give people a little bit of warning. If you have gout and you do a low carb or ketogenic diet, when you're new to it, you might have some flares. And it's because if you go on a true strict ketogenic diet and your body all of a sudden starts generating a lot of ketones compete with uric acid for excretion. And so all of a sudden you have all these ketones being excreted, that uric acid is going to be left behind, and you might have a gout flare. Over time, everything will normalize and people tend to have fewer gout attacks.
Thank you so much, Amy. Amy, how to deal with PCOS?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, is, I've actually heard some people call it diabetes of the ovaries. And the major cause of it is chronically elevated insulin. And I don't say that lightly. In the nutrition world, we very often say that something is associated with something else, because it's hard to say that something is fully the cause, right? There's a lot of different things that contribute. I've read papers where the researchers come right out and say chronically high insulin is the causal factor in PCOS. But that's actually really helpful to know, because I've heard a lot of women say, I have PCOS, so therefore I have insulin resistance, or I'm at greater risk for insulin resistance or diabetes. And it's actually the other way around. Because you already have chronically high insulin, that's why you have PCOS. But it's fairly simple to either reverse or at least dramatically improve with a low carb or ketogenic diet. And it's not, there's a lot of different signs and symptoms of PCOS. Many women with PCOS are carrying excess weight. Some don't. Not all women with PCOS are overweight, but many of them have acne or facial hair, irregular menstrual cycles, oily skin, lots of things. And it all comes from the insulin. When you look at, insulin is one hormone, but it affects it affects testosterone, it affects estrogen, it affects all these other things. And when you start to correct the insulin, it has this positive cascade on all those other hormones. And the actual clinical research is limited, but the research that has been done is really powerful, that this way of eating is very powerful. I can't say it's going to completely fix PCOS immediately in everyone, but it really, really helps.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, you have written a blog post called "Is There a Male Equivalent to PCOS?" Can you talk about that?
Right. Yeah. So same thing. So when insulin is chronically high, some women will have this problem with all these other hormones, and all the effects they have, the irregular cycles, the facial hair and everything, comes because of those disturbed hormones. The same thing happens in men, except the effects are different. But when men have chronically high insulin, it also affects testosterone and different things in them. And there's a lot we don't know, but It's like interesting because high insulin does the opposite thing in men and women. In women, it raises testosterone, and in men, it lowers testosterone. So in men, we see more of like a feminine or an effeminate type of appearance. They start to grow breast tissue, like enlarged breasts, more of a soft kind of body shape, like hip kind of, and carrying more fat around the hips. And there's things in men that you would never connect to a metabolic problem or to insulin. Things like enlarged prostate. You know, insulin is a growth promoting hormone. It helps things get bigger. So we know it helps grow fat tissue. It helps us all get larger. It helps grow the prostate gland. And it actually, men dealing with erectile dysfunction, if you if there's no other reasonable explanation, like if you've had a physical injury to the area or you have depression or something, you might have a problem. But if you can't think of any reason of why you should have trouble with erectile function, it's a cardiovascular problem. And a lot of cardiovascular problems, meaning with the blood vessels, are problems with blood sugar and insulin. Because when blood sugar and insulin are chronically high, it affects the way the blood vessels expand and contract. And to get and maintain an erection, you need proper blood flow. So it's what I've learned over the past few years with this chronically high insulin is there's almost nothing it doesn't affect in men and women. There's no body system, no organ, no tissue that it doesn't affect negatively in some way. And it's like we hear insulin and glucose and we automatically think of obesity and type 2 diabetes. But there's all this other stuff that you would never imagine is connected to these metabolic problems. It's amazing.
Thank you so much, Amy. Amy, many of my subscribers complains that they have low hemoglobin level, especially women. What is your experience with that?
Well, there's a lot of women that do not eat enough iron-rich foods. And with an audience in India, I know there's a lot of vegetarians. And so there is iron in plant foods. Iron does occur in plant foods, but it's more difficult for your body to absorb that iron. So the iron that occurs in animal foods is just easier for your body to absorb and assimilate. And most women, I just did 2 videos actually on this on my channel. Most women do not eat enough protein because we're going to, at least in the animal foods, that's where we find iron in red meat, really. And if you don't eat beef, which is a cultural, thing that I understand, you can do lamb. There's venison, there's other animal foods, some certain types of shellfish and seafood are very high in iron. And it's a quality of life issue because being anemic like that, you can have fatigue, you can have depression, just general malaise. You just don't feel your best. And it's very easily fixed with getting more iron.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, why sometimes blood sugar levels are higher in keto, like while doing keto?
I love this. Is like you ask the greatest questions. Your audience is very lucky. So yeah, you generally, obviously, on a low carb or ketogenic diet, when you're eating very little carbohydrate, your blood sugar should be like in the low normal range. And for most people, that's the case. But every now and then, it's higher than we would expect, or especially the fasting level in the morning, not always during the day, and there's a lot we don't know about this, but what we think is that when you are on a very low carb diet, your body is primarily fueled by fat and a little bit with ketones. So your body simply doesn't need a whole lot of glucose. So there's very, very normal processes in your body that do require glucose, and there's very normal hormonal surges that raise your blood sugar, and it's not harmful, it's not dangerous, these are normal things that happen. But because your body doesn't really need as much glucose, when those processes happen, that glucose is just going to be in your blood for a little bit longer than someone else's whose cells are ready to suck up that glucose all the time. Your cells are thinking, no, I'm okay, I'm fine, I have plenty of fat, I have plenty of ketones, I don't need that glucose. So and it's not, we have to start having an appreciation for all the context, because if you know that you haven't really eaten any sugar or starch and you're worried that your blood sugar is, let's say, 110 or 115, which isn't really that high to begin with, but it's higher than you would expect on a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, then you know that's your own body making that glucose. You didn't get it from a donut, you didn't get it from, a piece of bread. So your body's doing that for a reason. You don't know what the reason is, but it's there. And do you know who Dr. Robert Sivas is? So I think he's brilliant, and he has mentioned, and his normal blood sugar is 60 something, 70 something, but so his blood sugar is normally pretty low. When he's swimming or running, it could be like I think he said 170, or like it could double. His blood sugar could more than double, but he's not worried about it because he's engaged in a high intensity activity and his cells need the fuel. And he knows he didn't eat carbs, so his body's making the glucose because it needs it. And we have to stop being afraid of just normal human physiology. The blood sugar being elevated in that context is different than it being elevated when when you had breakfast 3 hours ago and you're sitting at your desk and your blood sugar is 200. That's a problem.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, how to prevent Alzheimer's disease?
Well, I wrote a book called The Alzheimer's Antidote, and if anyone's curious why a nutritionist, and especially like a keto-oriented nutritionist, would care about Alzheimer's, it's because they sometimes call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain. And the truth is, I don't know if we can prevent Alzheimer's. I can't say for sure that we can prevent it. I think we can, because when you really start looking at the research, it looks more and more like Alzheimer's disease could be a diet and lifestyle condition, just like cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes and all of these other things we're talking about. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for cognitive impairment and cognitive decline, like a vitamin B12 deficiency all by itself can cause cognitive impairment. So that aside, looking just at this sort of type 3 diabetes thing, where that comes from is that the main problem in the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's is that the neurons have lost the ability to properly metabolize glucose. So they're not getting fuel. These cells are basically starving. They have no fuel, and so they can't function properly. And we're not sure why this happens, but it's having metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance is a major risk factor for this, regardless of your family history, regardless of your genetics. It is a major risk factor. Type 2 diabetes is a major risk factor. And this, Alzheimer's disease obviously primarily affects older people. But it used to be that it was very elderly people, people in their 80s, in their 90s. Now it's affecting people at younger and younger ages, just like type 2 diabetes, just like non-alcoholic fatty liver. We see those conditions happening now in little kids, in toddlers. And now we're starting to see Alzheimer's being diagnosed in people in their mid-50s. And so this is, it's, it's very, I don't know what else to say. It's fascinating. And like, to actually to answer your question, how do we prevent it? If it, again, we don't know for sure that it can be prevented. If it is a dietary and lifestyle disease, and if it is being driven primarily by many, many years or decades of chronically high blood sugar and insulin, then the answer would be, or one of the answers would be, to follow a diet and have lifestyle practices that keep your blood sugar and insulin within a healthy range. And not everybody needs a ketogenic diet to do that. And because I get that question a lot, is it too late? I'm already 60 years old. I'm 70 years old. Is it too late? Not everyone needs a ketogenic diet. Whatever diet you can follow that keeps you metabolically healthy is fine. You probably can't have 300 grams of carbs a day, but you might not have to have as little as 20 grams a day.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, what are your thoughts on focusing too much on antioxidants?
Oh, that's one I've never been asked before. I think your own body produces antioxidants internally. And those are the ones that seem most powerful for detoxifying or for battling off pathogens or whatever we want to call, neutralizing free radicals and these other things that antioxidants do. And I'm not very familiar with the scientific literature on taking antioxidants, like taking vitamin C supplements or taking resveratrol. I think there's a role for that. I think when you take those things in very, very high doses, like what we call a pharmacological dose, it's almost like a medicine at that point, where it can have an effect that it doesn't necessarily have if you just take a small amount in a food. But I think your body makes its own antioxidants from certain building blocks. Now, those nutrients can provide some of those building blocks, but a lot of those building blocks come from protein foods. They come from amino acids. They come from certain vitamins and minerals that you're going to get in those foods. So I think, people will tout these antioxidants as being anti-aging and that kind of thing. And the best anti-aging trick is keeping your blood sugar normal, because high blood sugar will age you faster than anything. Does that make sense? Like, people take lots and lots of antioxidants to undo damage, but if you're not doing that damage in the first place, you don't have to counteract it.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, you say that we need to do strategic supplementation. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it depends on what somebody's situation is. If you are overtly deficient in something, then a supplement can probably help. And there are certain medications that are known to deplete nutrients or to, increase your need. They might make you excrete more of it or make it difficult to absorb. So you need to get more of a certain nutrient. And people can look that up online. If you're taking a certain medication, you can just search for, drug nutrient interactions or something like that. But in the context of just health and a diet, with keto specifically, not everyone needs supplements. Most people don't supplement anything, but some people find that extra magnesium helps, because some people tend toward constipation on keto. So if you have trouble there, magnesium can help. It also helps with muscle cramps and stiffness. Some people, I don't consider this a supplement, but on keto, of course, we very often need a lot more sodium or salt. So some people would say that, consider that a supplement. I just think you just be generous with salt. Other than that, it really depends. I take certain things as just a little insurance policy. Yeah, I don't have any blanket recommendations for people. I think I think if you're having trouble sticking to a diet that you know would be helpful for you, supplements might be even more helpful there because you know your diet isn't quite where it should be. Like, for example, something like chromium is helpful for blood sugar support. Berberine is helpful. So if you're very good with your diet, then you might not need the supplements. But if you know that you're not really as on point with the diet, then the supplements can help. But supplements, they are exactly that. They should be supplemental to your healthy diet. They're not going to fix you all by themselves.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, what is the problem with meal planning, like meal plans?
Oh, well, so it depends. Some people really love a plan. They want to have the plan for the week. They want to go grocery shopping. They want to have everything done. And that's great. If that's you, that's fine. I have no problem with that. I don't give people meal plans because I like to show people how easy and simple it is to eat a low carb or ketogenic diet without a plan. Now, I would say I teach people strategies, but not plans. And so when I say I don't do meal plans, I think I don't want to tell another grown adult what to have for lunch next Tuesday, but I will teach you how to keep your kitchen stocked, what the kinds of things to keep in your fridge, the kinds of things to keep in your pantry, so that at any time you can have a meal ready in 10 minutes. That's, so if you have canned salmon and you have some broccoli or whatever you like, if you keep some kind of meat defrosted, if meat is defrosted in the fridge, depending on what it is, it only takes a few minutes to put it in a skillet and cook it. So I really prefer to show people that, keto, it's a protein and a vegetable. It's so simple. And I really, people make this so much more complicated than it needs to be. And if people want to have a plan for themselves, that's fine. But I really think it helps to understand that you don't need that. If you know the kinds of foods you like, then keep those on hand, keep large quantities. If you have 1 or 2 hours a week where you can just cook a huge amount of food ahead of time so it's ready to go, that's what makes this easy to do. Have it done ahead of time.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, do we have to fast on keto?
No. Fasting has become very, very popular. And it's not required, but most people actually find themselves skipping meals just because they're not hungry. When you're off what we call it the blood sugar roller coaster, those very, very crazy ups and downs in blood sugar, once that's evened out and you feel steady all day, you just don't get that intense ravenous hunger that comes on out of nowhere. It's just like a pleasant hunger sensation. And the appetite is so well controlled that most people only eat 2 meals a day, sometimes even one. And that's okay. But to me, that's not fasting. When I think of fasting, to me, that implies deliberately withholding food when you are genuinely hungry. And so, but now, if you do eat 3 meals a day, you're not doing something wrong. Because I feel like there's people out there who think they have to fast, or they're not doing it right if they don't fast. So there's no right or wrong way to do a low carb or keto diet. It depends on what works for you. Some people will say that sort of snacking throughout the day is terrible. I don't think it's terrible at all if you're eating the right things. Some people prefer to have 1 or 2 very large meals. Some people prefer to graze on little things throughout the day. I honestly don't think there's any right or wrong. And the fasting, like I said, I think we're using I prefer the phrase time restricted eating, just because I again, fasting to me implies forcing yourself to go hungry. Whereas with keto, if you're just following those natural signals, you eat when you're hungry, and when you're not hungry, you don't eat. And if it just so happens that you're only hungry for one meal a day or two meals a day, that's not fasting, because when you are hungry, you do eat. Does that make sense? And if for some reason people do want, because I think there are benefits to putting a time restriction, but if somebody does want to fast but they're not ready yet, or if you're brand new to this way of eating, don't worry about fasting. Don't worry about timing. Just get used to this type of food. Let your body get adjusted. Then think about the timing and think about skipping meals. Don't worry about getting it all perfect at once. Don't worry about mastering all the different things. The number one, like we said at the beginning, the number one most important thing is just keeping the carbs low. Do that first, get used to that, and then work on the next things.
Thank you so much, Amy. Amy, now we have questions from subscribers.
Mm-hmm.
So first question is, how to deal with irregular periods?
Oh, so okay, so we talked about PCOS. So it depends on why the periods are irregular. If you have PCOS, then keto should help with that. It might take a while. So if you've only been doing it for a little bit, give it time. It might take time for that to help. If you some women are underweight and exercising too much, and that's almost the opposite issue, where they're not carrying enough. But the female body has to have a certain amount of fat to be able to menstruate. So I don't know what this person's situation is. When you don't have enough body fat, your body will interpret that as it's not a safe time to have a child. I can't support a life, like I better not try to conceive right now. My guess is that's not this person's issue. Stick to, if you're not already doing a low carb diet, start there. There's, and make sure you're getting enough sleep, make sure your stress levels, try to manage your stress. But keto, that should help. Other than that, I mean, I hope if you can find a good endocrinologist, there's other female issues. There's something called estrogen dominance that can make your cycle much longer. I had that once a few years ago. Your cycle might still be regular, but instead of like 28 or 30 days, it'll be like 40 something days. So it just, if you're able to get some of those levels tested, that could help too.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, next question is, how to gain weight on a low carb diet?
How to gain weight? Eat more. That's definitely eat more. If you are not somebody who needs a ketogenic diet, there's a lot of people doing very strict keto diets who don't need them. And because keto is so popular, and it's clearly a very healthy, very therapeutic way to eat, but it's not the only healthy way. Like you said, you mentioned you had Dr. Westman on your show, and he and I wrote our book where we talk about slightly higher carb intake. Like keto's not the only way that this can be done. And if you do not need keto for a medical reason, I would actually recommend increasing your carbohydrate intake too, because some people find it difficult to eat enough on keto because the appetite is so well controlled. They have I've never had that problem. I never have enough. I never have trouble eating more food, but some people do. So but I don't know if this person is just talking about weight, or if they're talking about muscle mass, then you just need to eat a lot more food overall, and you need to build muscle. You need to resistance train. So I don't know if this person is like frail and underweight and just trying to gain any weight, or if it's somebody who's trying to build muscle. Then you need a lot more food, and you need to lift weights.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, but while on a keto diet, even the people who are like too underweight sometimes also gain weight, right? So like 'cause there are so many people who gain weight on a keto diet, and who are obese, they lose weight. So it's very interesting that it happens both
Yeah,
sides.
actually, no, I'm glad. Keto is not a weight loss diet. Keto is this is what Dr. Westman says. It's a fat burning diet. And this is why you can gain weight on a keto diet if you eat too much, quote unquote, if you eat more fat than you burn. So being in the state of ketosis only means that you are burning fat. Your primary fuel is fat. You don't know whether that's your stored body fat or the fat from the avocados and the nuts and the cheese and the ghee and all that. So you can gain weight if you eat more. But keto, I like to think of it as a weight normalizing diet, because you can. Very, very heavy people can lose weight. Very, very small people can gain weight. So it's a weight normalizing diet. It doesn't have to be a weight loss diet.
Thank you, Amy. Next question is, what diet do you suggest for busy people?
Well, if you have like 90 minutes on a Sunday or some evening, literally, I'm going to do a video on this soon. If you have an oven, you can get a large tray and put 10 pieces of chicken on it and stick it in the oven. While that's baking, you can have a large pot on the stove, steam a huge thing of broccoli, get another pot, steam a huge thing of cauliflower. If you can make very, very large quantities of food in advance, then you have food cooked and ready to go. And I know that it sounds very obvious to me, but you actually have to do it. If you do it, then you have food on hand all the time. So if you don't have time to cook 2 meals a day every day or 3 meals a day, cook once or twice a week. But if you cook certain things, you can really cook 4 or 5 days worth of food in about an hour or two. If you just cook, again, get very large dishes and stick everything in the oven all at once, or you can get an pressure cooker or the slow cooker where you can put a 4 or 5 pound piece of meat or pork or something into, but you have to remember to do that ahead of time. And depending on what your budget is, you could do restaurant food or takeout every meal if you wanted to, if you know how to order. You don't have to cook anything if you don't want to. If you can afford to have somebody else cook all your food, you can do this perfectly well eating at restaurants, if you just have to customize your order to know how to avoid the sugar and starch. I think it's nicer if you can cook your own food, but or you could even, I don't know what's available in India, but in the US, you can get pre-made chicken at the store. You can get pre-made salads, pre-made everything. And so depending again on what your budget is, you can just run into a shop and get something already made, as long as it's low in carbs.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, how to reverse high blood pressure?
Okay, so I think everyone knows, like with everything I'm saying in the show, I'm not a doctor, but I'm just giving you, So hypertension very often goes hand in hand again with this chronically high insulin. So low carb diets, I don't know if Dr. Westman talked about this or not when he was on, but not only does low carb and keto typically bring blood sugar down really nicely, it typically brings blood pressure down very nicely. And it doesn't always happen as quickly as it does for the blood sugar. Sometimes the blood pressure can take much longer to start improving, but it does tend to improve. Some people, so if you're not already doing a low carb or ketogenic diet, that's step number one. I recommend magnesium supplementation, because magnesium just tends to help with blood pressure. What else?
Sun?
Stress. I mean, stress is, that's like, that was the old stereotype of the stressed out businessman and the high blood pressure. Stress can affect blood pressure. So if you feel very stressed out, that can affect it. But if you have high blood pressure or type 2 diabetes, definitely and if you're taking medication, work with a doctor, because when you change your diet, especially if you do it like right away, you might need to adjust your medication pretty quickly. You don't want to, I mean, because this way of eating is so powerful that some of these changes can start to happen so quickly that you're going to need to adjust your medicine very soon. But yeah, you can monitor your blood pressure. I'm not sure what's available there, but in the US you can buy, monitors to test your blood pressure at home, so you could even see how it's going for yourself. And so salt let's talk about salt real quick. You've probably been told, oh, you have high blood pressure, you need a low sodium diet and not eat a lot of salt. And that for some people, that's true. There are some people who are sensitive to sodium, meaning when they eat a lot of sodium, the blood pressure goes up. In most people, it's actually the salt, the carbohydrate. Because just like we talked about the uric acid earlier, your insulin makes it harder for the body to release uric acid. Insulin makes your body retain more sodium. So you could eat less sodium, or you could just let your body excrete the sodium naturally. So I think when you're on a low carb or ketogenic diet, we typically need more sodium. So normally I recommend more sodium, but if you do have high blood pressure, we don't normally recommend the added sodium.
Thank you, Amy. What are the top 3 mistakes people do on a low carb diet?
My answer to everything today is like, it depends. So yeah, it depends on what their goal is. So many people do this for weight loss. So I'll go from that angle, I guess, but the top mistakes. So the new thing I see is that everybody's just overdoing fat because they've heard that they're supposed to eat a certain percentage of fat. They think that keto works because you're eating 80% fat, or they're following an app that tells them, you need more fat. So they're putting butter in their coffee and they're adding fat to everything. And for some people that works, it does. But if you're one of the many for whom it doesn't work, then, so that's one thing I see. What else? Probably, honestly, some of it's that sodium issue. Some people do this and they don't know that I don't want to use the word supposed to. They don't know that if they start to have headaches or feel dizzy or they don't feel well, that they need a lot more salt. Some people just jump into this without really educating themselves as to what to expect. And so they feel awful and they think, oh, that keto diet is terrible. I felt so bad and I had to eat carbs. And all it would have taken is like some salt on their food and they would have been fine. So that's one thing. And then I guess, I mean, for me, keto without the crazy, I think it's just trying to change everything and trying to perfect everything. Like I'll have people write to me, I have this macro and I'm fasting for this, and I have this app and I bought this MCT oil and I've heard people say things like, well, I wanted to do keto, but it's so expensive. Like I spent $500 and I haven't even bought any food yet. And I'm like, what did you buy? Like, what are you talking about? And it's because they bought a blood ketone meter and they bought exogenous ketones and they bought all this stuff that's not even food, that's not even required. So I think that's probably one of the big mistakes or it's not a mistake, it's just completely unnecessary. They're making it more complicated. They it doesn't have to be a high-tech thing. It makes it more difficult. It makes it more expensive. It makes it more inaccessible to people. This way of eating can be done on any budget, any level of education, any socioeconomic status. All you have to do is not eat sugar and starch. And if you love data, if you're like a tech geek and you want the app and the tracking and all that, do it, but it's not required. Dr. Atkins, I mean, the 40 something years ago, he wrote his book. None of this stuff existed and people did great. So that's one of the things I see. And it's why I think some people have a hard time sticking with this, because they can't keep up with all that. They can't keep, but you don't have to. And when they learn that they don't have to, it's like, oh, I didn't know it was so easy to do this.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amy. Amy, last question. Would you like to issue a 7-day challenge to our subscribers?
Oh, well, what would I do? Does it have to be related to the food, or it could be something else?
Anything, Amy. Your wish.
I will say to the women out there, I want you to make sure that you're getting at least, I want to say 80 or 85 grams of protein, if not more, at least. And ladies, when I say 80 or 85 grams of protein, that's not grams of food on a food scale. If you were to weigh your food, 80 grams of protein. Do you think your listeners know the difference between that? Okay. Because most women they're not there, especially if they're on a ketogenic diet. We've been made very afraid of protein. If you could even get to 90 or 100 grams, even better. But if you could get to 80 or 85, do that and see how you feel. Have whatever portion you're having of an animal protein, have more.
Amy, the surprising thing is that recently I interviewed Diana Rogers, and she exactly issued the same challenge.
Really?
Yeah.
To women specifically, or just everybody?
Yeah, to women and 100 grams.
Okay, so I'm not okay. But that's good to know that wouldn't have been crazy. Interesting. Okay, isn't that interesting? I know Diana. That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you
and men, yeah. I will say it to men. If you're not having 80, you need more. Like, you should also, if you're not at least 80, you need to be there too. Isn't that fascinating that she said the same thing? Has anyone reported back that they did that and they felt better, or?
Yeah, Amy, what happened is that they are like shifting slowly towards the animal foods. So they for example, they eat every weekly once. So I'm making them to eat daily. So indirectly, they are starting to do that.
Good. And I understand if they're not ready yet to eat more lamb or venison or bison. Do you do bison in India or no? I don't even know if it's available there. Okay. So
chicken, lamb, eggs. Eggs are pretty affordable here.
Okay. Yeah, eggs are so nutrient rich, and if you can do lamb, because lamb will have the iron and it will have the B12. Really so important for women. And I just lost my whole train of thought. What was I going to say? I think it's we've been trained. I don't know about India, but in the US, we've been culturally accustomed to think it's unladylike or it's unfeminine for a woman to eat a large piece of animal protein. And that's just not true. It's, we see all this stuff online of a woman with a big bowl of salad and her big smile with her salad. And there's nothing wrong with salad, but Put a big piece of lamb on top of that salad.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy. Amy, thank you so much for coming to the show and helping us to become healthy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you for the great questions. Please subscribe to BNS Goku Great.